wonderful year, a wonderful journey.
I haven't seen as cruel a defeat in all my time watching football. It is beyond belief that a team that gives so much that those fellas give today are on the wrong side of that result. They have been an absolute credit to themselves.
If there has ever been a county in the GAA that has gripped the nation with enthralling football, dramatic comebacks and eventual heartbreak, it must be that of Mayo football. Since Mayo's last All-Ireland final victory back in 1951, Mayo have lost 9 All-Ireland finals, including 2 replays, and that's not to mention the numerous semi-final defeats in that time as well. Whether it's been bizarre own goals, freakish points or dramatic late misses, Mayo has lost All-Ireland finals in some of the cruelest ways known to the sport of Gaelic games. In fact, some even believe that there are some dark forces involved in Mayo's 69-year wait. The curse was that Mayo would not win an All-Ireland until all members of that current team had died, after the priest cast a spell on the current Mayo side that had won the All-Ireland in 1951 when they were returning through Foxford on the team bus, and they passed a funeral without respectfully suspending their boisterous celebrations. Now, in a 2016 TG4 documentary, the 2 surviving players at that current time, Paddy Prendergast and Padraig Carney, dismissed the story, and they said it was deemed to make up for the near misses in the previous decades that had cost Mayo. Now, I can understand why some people would believe this, to be perfectly honest, but I'm going to be honest, I don't buy it whatsoever. Instead, I have my own reasoning for Mayo's 69-year drought of the Sam Maguire, and in this video we will look at some of the in-depth reasons that has cost Mayo, be it poor management, player power, the culture around the team, or even some bad luck combined with an overriding weak mentality from this Mayo squad. Now, it is worth pointing out that this video will be focusing on the team from 2012 until present, as the sides from the 90s and the 04 and 06 team should be judged separately, although a lot of the points about today's team probably still apply to them as well. And it is a mystery how Mayo never quite won the All-Ireland. I mean, when you look at some of the players they had, like Lee Keegan, Cillian O'Connor, Aidan O'Shea, Andy Moran, even combined with a strong management teams like Stephen Rochford and James Horan, it is quite a mystery how this Mayo side never won an All-Ireland. But one of the first main reasoning behind them not winning an All-Ireland was that of bad management. And so it is worth pointing out first that the players are certainly not innocent in this in any way whatsoever, and in fact we will get into Mayo's player power culture in just a moment. However, there are no doubts that Mayo's poor management down the years has cost them in big moments. Whether it has been James Horan, Stephen Rochford, or even the managerial pairing of Pat Holmes and Noel Connolly, there has been a lack of leadership, tactics and coaching to get the best out of this team. Perhaps the only exception has been that of James Horan, who won 4 Connacht Championships and the National Football League as of 2019 in his first year back in charge. However, there have been some flaws in his style of management as well. In 2011 and 2012, James Horan would introduce several talents to the biggest stage of Gaelic football, such as Aidan O'Shea, Lee Keegan, Colin Boyle and Keith Higgins, and adopted a free-flowing style of Gaelic football that would focus on dynamic front play from Aidan O'Shea, Lee Keegan and Andy Moran, to name a few. The problem, however, was the lack of endurance and physical presence that Mayo showed throughout these years, and in fact this was a common theme throughout each era of management. For example, in 2012, Mayo almost squandered a 10-point and comfortable lead to Dublin, and despite still going on to win this game, the evidence was there from early on. In the 2012 All-Ireland final, the physical presence of Donegal and Michael Murphy would outmuscle and outthink Mayo by hard work and some great tactical thinking from Jim McGuinness, as Mayo wouldn't have an answer to Donegal's blanket defence. In 2013, Mayo would focus on improving conditioning and strength, but it again would have nothing to show for it, losing that year's final by a point to Dublin. In fact, Mayo's approach to that final would be to absorb possession and draw Dublin out from defence and limit Dublin's strength in attack. However, similarly to the 2012 final, Mayo would leave a lot of space in the full back line for Dublin to exploit, resulting in countless goal chances, hence why Dublin scored 2 goals in this game, and similarly Donegal would do the same the year previous. Now obviously we cannot discount the 2015 saga where joint managers Pat Holmes and Noel Connolly were forced out by the Mayo team, but if we skip ahead very quickly to Stephen Rochford, he would adopt a mix of bad preparation, complacency and a lack of motivation in the early stages of each campaign under his reign. Each year Mayo were knocked out in the early stages of the Connacht Championship, which was followed up with sluggish qualifier campaigns, scrapping wins against less inferior opposition like Derry, Fermanagh or Cork. But to be honest, apart from 2018, you must give them some sort of credit for getting to the All-Ireland final in both 2016 and 2017, with the quality of their star players pulling them through when they most needed it. But on the flip side of things, they were probably Dublin's only real challenger in them years, as Kerry, Donegal and Tyrone were all very much in transition. I have no doubts that Rochford is a smart manager and understands the game better than most, considering what he has achieved with Corofin. But I can't help but think that there was a severe lack of leadership, togetherness and effective training methods in that Mayo squad. Mayo would rarely produce a good performance in the league or in the early stages of the championship under Rochford, and I think the fact that they won the league less than a year after he left backs up my point. I think it's fair to say that the team just didn't quite believe in Stephen Rochford. Following on from that saga in 2015, I just don't think the Mayo side ever quite bought into Rochford's training methods. They would never get quite going in the early stages of the championship, and I just don't think Rochford was really able to motivate this team and really get the best out of them, like what James Horan was, for example. Now, perhaps one of the main reasons why Stephen Rochford struggled as the manager of Mayo was probably down to player power and ultimately a bad culture within the Mayo side. Now, we've seen multiple pundits speak of how Mayo's football and culture has been one of the main reasons for their downfall. After the 2019 semi-final loss, Joe Brolly went on to state that Mayo haven't won an All-Ireland because they don't trust each other and are not a group of equals. In his article on the Irish Independent, he mentions how the Mayo players have turned on their own in the past, and he referenced the 2015 saga where joint managers Pat Holmes and Noel Connolly were forced out due to the player unrest after the players had a majority vote of no confidence in the Mayo management team. He also mentioned the fact that in the Mayo camp there's been a celebration of mediocrity, and the fact that their All-Ireland final appearances have been seen as a success rather than a failure. And then when we look back again at Rochford's reign from 2016 to 2018, we can see how many would think that the Mayo players controlled the dressing room, deciding who would play and who would be captain and disregarding any tactical approach from that management team. And from an outsider looking in, some of the players would choose when they wanted to turn up, and they would choose when they wanted to play to their potential. A lot of these players wouldn't show any passion or desire until the later rounds of the championship. A lot of these players wouldn't play their absolute best football until All-Ireland semi-finals, All-Ireland finals. In the Connacht Championship, Mayo were always sluggish, weak and just weren't prepared and weren't ready for what the opposition had to throw at them. And I think this is something that has cost Mayo. Their lack of preparation, their lack of desire is something that you just simply can't turn on in the big moments. When you look at Dublin, for example, Dublin always go about things the right way. Their Leinster Championship, they're prepared, they're ready, they have the right training methods, and they have the right mentality and approach towards getting to an All-Ireland final each year. Because Mayo's approach is off in the early stages of each championship season, this results in Mayo just not being able to turn that back on in All-Ireland finals. And to be honest, it makes a lot of sense in my opinion when you actually look back at a lot of the All-Ireland finals that Mayo played in under Stephen Rochford. I mean, the fact that they just stumbled into all of these All-Ireland finals, scraping through qualifiers, being knocked out in the early stages of the championship, it makes sense getting to those finals would be almost a celebration, would be something to be seen as a success, because they were very poor earlier on in the year. They were nowhere near playing to their potential, and the fact that they just managed to turn it around was somewhat seen as a success, but in actual fact it wasn't, because again Mayo would lose those All-Ireland finals. And I think when you adopt the principles of not trying and not putting in 100% of your best effort, not just in this situation in Gaelic football, but I think in anything in life, when it comes to the moment when you have to turn it on, when you have to be ready, if you haven't been ready for the previous 6 to 8 weeks, if you haven't been applying those training methods, if you haven't been prepared, and then you're coming up against a team that is prepared, that has been putting in those training methods, that has been ready and been working towards this moment, how exactly are you going to be better than the opposition? You know, you have to be prepared, you have to be ready, and Mayo just simply were not ready when the big moments came. And the third reason was the weak mentality associated with Mayo. Whether it was the psychological impact and pressure of not winning an All-Ireland in such a long time, Mayo always seemed to crumble in decisive moments from big players. If we start with 2012, Mayo had an awful start to that year's All-Ireland final. They were 2-0 down before their first score on the 15 minutes by Kevin McLaughlin, and Mayo never got to grips with the likes of Michael Murphy and Colin McFadden. And in the final closing minutes, Mayo could have went for it more. They could have thrown the kitchen sink at it. They could have really got in behind Donegal and really went all out attack, but they just never did. They never really threw everything at it, and I think that was in many ways a lack of mentality, a lack of resolve, and that was ultimately what would cost them in that year's All-Ireland final. In 2013, it was similar, but a little bit different. Mayo would start that year's All-Ireland final a lot better. They would be in front, they'd be comfortable, they'd be cruising. But when a long ball by Dublin's Paul Flynn was misjudged by both Ger Cafferty and Robert Hennelly, that would allow Bernard Brogan to fist the ball into the net, and Dublin would be in front in that year's final. And a common theme throughout a lot of these finals was when Mayo fell behind, when the momentum was against them, they would ultimately crumble, and we would see that in the second half when Bernard Brogan and Ger Brennan started to put multiple points together for Dublin. Mayo just simply did not have any answers whatsoever. Their own goal from Lee Keegan would be followed up by a Dublin goal of Bernard Brogan, and Mayo just wouldn't be able to counteract Dublin's pace and power in the attack. And Mayo would even show a lack of confidence at times in the decisive moments. In that 2013 final, it was in the final few minutes, Mayo had a chance, a goal chance, a chance of creating something. A something or nothing moment when Cillian O'Connor had the chance on goal from a free kick, but instead he took the point. It was the final few seconds of the game. There's multiple options he could have done. He could have laid the ball off, went for the goal. He could have directly went for the goal himself, but instead he took the point, which shows a lack of confidence in my opinion. Now, Cillian O'Connor did come out and say later on that he wasn't aware that the game was over, that he thought there was still another minute or so to go in this game. But for me, to not know that, to not know what minutes the game was on, that also shows a lack of leadership. And then of course we have the 2016 final. 2 own goals in the first half when it was probably Dublin's worst performance in an All-Ireland final. And it was undoubtedly the pressure that would get to Mayo in big moments. Of course, first of all, we look at Rob Hennelly's error when he dropped the ball from Paul Flynn's cross and then dragged down Paddy Andrews. And of course, this allowed Dermot Connolly to dispatch the penalty after David Clark had entered the field of play. But of course, then what about the key decisive miss by Cillian O'Connor in injury time? A free kick that Cillian O'Connor would normally dispatch with ease. Although it was from a tough angle, and look, listen, this was not an easy free kick. This was one that normally he would score. And the pressure just got to him, and instead he fumbled the opportunity, hit it wide, and Dublin won that year's All-Ireland. And of course then we have the 2017 final. And of course this was a final that Mayo probably produced their best performance. But once again, it was the same old story. Mayo would unfortunately lose yet again in another All-Ireland final, and in fact they even led by 2 points going into the closing 6 to 7 minutes, and they looked destined to finally end the wait. But of course, you know, it was the same old story for Mayo. The miss again from Cillian O'Connor in the closing stages, a free that had he have scored probably would have won the All-Ireland for Mayo. It was almost in the identical position to the one the year previous, but this time it was the post that denied him. And in fact, Dublin would then go down the other end, and Dean Rock in the exact same, in almost similar position, he would score and Dublin would win the All-Ireland. Now that just shows in many ways the difference, of course, between Dublin and Mayo at that time, and the weak mentality that Mayo just very much had. In key moments, in big moments when you need your star players to step up, you need your big players to step up to adopt the pressure and take it and take those big opportunities, Mayo were unable to do so. And look, listen, this Mayo side had phenomenal talent, there's absolutely no doubt about it. In many ways, they were unlucky in a lot of the big moments as well, and we cannot deny that. The 2 own goals, very rare occurrence, very rarely happens. You know, there's no one even really to blame in those big moments. Yes, Mayo were dragged out of position and weren't defensively set up. They should have certainly done a lot better. They were coming up against probably the greatest team for a generation in Dublin that Mayo couldn't stop, and a lot of other teams couldn't stop. Galway, Tyrone, Kerry, and this Dublin side, you know, winning 6 All-Irelands in 7 years. It was always going to be very difficult for Mayo to try and end that. It was always going to be very difficult for them to stop one of the greatest sides of all time. And if Mayo were in any other era, if this Mayo side was in the 2000s or in the 90s, I think they would have won an All-Ireland. They would have had other teams to compete with back then, but I think they would have won an All-Ireland in my opinion, and that was ultimately what cost Mayo in some ways. Was obviously the other reasons that I just mentioned, but there was certainly some bad luck that was involved as well. And of course that pretty much wraps it up. And of course, as an outsider looking in, it's hard to know when Mayo will ever win an All-Ireland. I mean, that team from that time period has, you know, very much been dispersed. A lot of their players have retired, a lot of their players are stepping down, and as time goes on, it's hard to know if Mayo will ever win an All-Ireland in the coming years. Of course, with James Horan back in charge, I mean, he will bring through young players, he will make changes, he'll keep some of the experienced players like Aidan O'Shea, Lee Keegan and Cillian O'Connor, but it's hard to know if Mayo will ever quite get over the line and win an All-Ireland. And of course, that pretty much wraps up the video. If you have enjoyed, please leave a like, subscribe, and yeah, let me know down in the comments below. When do you think Mayo will eventually win an All-Ireland? Will they ever win an All-Ireland in our lifetimes? I mean, who knows? It's really hard to know. And as I said before, it's been tough on Mayo in many ways, but I suppose that's just how it goes.